Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of My Veterinary Life podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Marcy Kirk. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm joined by our other co-host, Dr. Annie Chavant.
Hello, everyone. My pronouns are also she, her, hers.
This is week 2 of our 3-part mini-series focusing on some new initiatives at the AVMA, and we are thrilled to again be joined by 2 very special guests, Dr. Latonia Craig, the AVMA's Chief Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer, and Dr. Jen Brandt, Director of Veterinary Wellbeing and Diversity and Inclusion Initiatives. And we are going to focus on the next 2 educational sharpenings, which are under the larger umbrella of Journey for Teams. And if you're like, what is she talking about? I want you to go back and listen to last week's episode because we give a really good overview of what Journey for Teams is, what you can expect with educational sharpenings. We're going to do a deeper dive into 2 more so you can kind of be prepared for what's coming up and give examples of how they're going to apply. And so we've got a jam-packed episode. And before we jump in, we do want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you with support from our educational partner, IDEX, whose diagnostic and software solutions create clarity in the complex, constantly evolving world of veterinary medicine. And you can learn more at IDEX.com. So with that, welcome back, Dr. Craig and Dr. Brandt.
Thank you.
Hello. Happy to be here again.
So the last episode, we sort of set the stage for this conversation by talking about what Journey for Teams is. And I'm wondering this time, since people probably know what Journey for Teams is now, if we could maybe just expand a little bit on like what else is going on in this area? What else are we sort of looking for that people might be able to tune into? So Dr. Craig, could you kind of give us like just an overview of a few highlights that are coming up besides educational sharpenings, which is be the main focus?
Yeah, so I'm happy to do that. I think some of the other things outside of Journey for Teams, and I know we'll be talking about educational sharpenings, another topic today. I'd say 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years for me in August, we did initiate the Frederick Douglass Patterson Award. We already honored folks in the veterinary space who engaged in service, and some of that service might have been DEI work, but we did not have an award that really focused on the work of DEI. And so we did establish the Frederick Douglass Patterson Award. Frederick Douglass Patterson was a president at Tuskegee University. It was Tuskegee Institute, now Tuskegee University. He was also the founder of the veterinary school, and he was a trailblazer beyond veterinary medicine. He's responsible for the unit that was at Tuskegee where the Tuskegee Airmen emerged. He was also an advisor to President Reagan, and he did some international work. And so one of the other things that has been still around, one of his legacy programs has been UNCF, which is the United Negro College Fund, that has been a critical source of income for historically Black colleges and universities and for underrepresented students wanting to go to college and providing that access. And so he is a veterinarian. He graduated from Iowa State at a time when veterinary schools were segregated, and Iowa State took a chance on him and others. And he made the best of not only that experience, but he took his work beyond veterinary medicine into world affairs. And so that's somebody we should be celebrating and honoring. And we wanted to give that honor by establishing our first DEI award under his name. Our first recipient of that award was Dean Willie Reed, who is the dean at Purdue University, who's also been a mentor to me. We also have Dr. Ruby Perry, who will be our second recipient. And so we'll be able to honor her at convention. And then we've got a menu of DEI initiatives that we'll be doing at convention, along with our JFT slate. We also have our Unsung Heroes, which we also launched a year ago, where we wanted to honor veterinary team members that may not necessarily hold the title of veterinarian or vet tech, who do a lot of work that contributes to the overall operation of the organization, but may not necessarily receive the accolades or attention that they might deserve. And so we took the time to honor those individuals, and those folks could hold the title of groomer. They could be frontline business staff people. It could be someone answering the phone. Every single position is critical to the organization. And so we wanted to bring light to that. And so we'll be honoring unsung heroes in the state of Texas, honoring, I believe, 5 or 6. We've honored some in Colorado last year. And moving forward, hopefully we'll be able to make this a national initiative where we will be able to get names from everywhere. So that is our direction for next year. But we also have partnerships with Central High School. Central High School has a veterinary science program. Over 100 students, underrepresented students, are in that program. So we've teamed up with Critter Fixers. They were able to go down, provide some community service. They were also able to come. We took the students to Churchill Downs to get some experiences there. And then we've got quite a few other folks that have come to see them, and we'll continue that work moving forward. And just some other pieces. You get me talking about this, I'm not going to stop. We've got our honoring some of our DEI legends. And then I have to mention this is our summit that is coming up in November. We'll have our inaugural Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Wellbeing Summit, bringing to light the symbiotic relationship between DEI and well-being. A lot of folks have asked, why are we putting those two things together? Well, when we talk about DEI, we're talking about, the people, and we're talking about how do we make sure that folks have opportunities? How do we make sure that we foster belonging? But the well-being piece is introspectively, it's like when I look at all of these things, am I happy? Am I satisfied with how I'm being valued and how I'm being included? Are people giving me what I need? And if you separate those two things, you don't really get the whole picture of how someone feels and is showing up in their workplace. And so we're bringing that to the fold at the summit. And so there will be a lot of opportunities for folks to get engaged.
Wow, lots of very exciting things happening. I think that was a great kind of summary or overview of some things that have been going on, and then some things to be looking forward to up at convention and beyond. So yeah, thanks for giving us that sort of the highlight reel.
Yeah.
Awesome. So in addition to those DEI initiatives, Dr. Craig mentioned Journey for Teams, and that's kind of the focus of this 3-part series that we're doing here in June. And so we highlighted the first 2 educational sharpenings last week. We want to dive into some of, I guess, a sneak preview of some of the topics that you can expect in this program as well. So getting an exclusive behind the scenes look here. And the next topic that we want to talk about is perspective taking. So, Dr. Brandt, if you could help us, one, kind of understand what is meant by perspective taking, and then tell us a little bit about why it's important in the workplace.
Yeah, I think we've often heard the phrase, put yourself in someone else's shoes, but perspective taking really embodies that, like not literally putting on the shoes, but stepping into somebody else's world a bit and then looking at the world through their eyes, and not with your judgment from your lived experiences, but truly from their experience, which, by the way, can be challenging often. And it's important. It's one of those powerhouse skills that has such huge ripple effects, certainly in the workplace. We know that when we have that capacity for perspective taking, that it tends to lead to more effective and respectful communication, which again makes sense because it's less judgment, more curiosity, more interest in somebody else's point of view. Like it's invited in because we're interested and we care about it. That in turn tends to reduce misunderstandings and conflict, or at least gives us a tool to navigate that conflict much more effectively. It facilitates innovative problem solving because, again, it's not just my way of looking at something, it's bringing in something that I would never have even thought about, or often like a hybrid then of those two ideas, and we come up with something that might be even better. It tends to foster strong team bonds, and it tends to encourage more collaboration. Teams tend to be more productive when they have that skill set. And interestingly, it tends to increase our ability to adapt to change and learn from challenges. And again, it's because we're not seeing the world from such a fixed perspective that there's no room to accept or see that there are different approaches that we could take.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's such a great overview. And I think you're right. We've all heard a little bit about this, but this is a great term to sort of attach to it. And I know you kind of gave good overview, but do you have like a specific example that might apply to veterinary medicine just to sort of emphasize this point to the audience?
Yeah, one of the examples that comes to mind is I had the privilege of teaching a week-long intensive to veterinary leaders. And one of the topics that we talked about was power differential. And most of the leaders were like, yeah, but that's not really a thing for me. In terms of my leadership style, I have an open door policy. I let everybody know that they can come talk to me at any point. Or I grew up with these folks, like they really know me. So not understanding that with that title and with that sense of power, it does change the relationship, whether you intend it to or not. And so what we had them do was we had them pair up in an exercise, and then the person they were paired with was to give them feedback. But to try to model and create that sense of a power differential, which is granted kind of tricky to try to manifest in a training. But what we did to try to create that sense was have the person giving the feedback stand on a chair, so taller now than the leader recipient of this information. And along with that height differential, we tend to associate that with power and command and authority. And what was interesting that even in a role play, we immediately saw the body language shift of the person who said, oh, there's really no such thing as a power differential. Their body language became more agitated. Their arms were crossed. They were stepping away to try to create some space and distance. And then we really kind of, deconstructed that what does that power differential look like when it's playing out day in and day out? And what was interesting is many of the people in the workshop were taller. And so they said they've navigated a whole world where they've never had to look up to somebody. They've always been the one looking down. And now you add that to a title, and that they had no awareness whatsoever of how that might be perceived. And many even then talked about how even their desk setup creates more of that they have the bigger, more powerful chair, or at least a bigger chair that stands taller, and the person that's talking to them is often in this tiny chair. So we keep creating that power differential. And so then what does it look like to recognize that now? Again, not blame it, but just, wow, now I see what it's like to be on the receiving end of that, even if I don't intend that. And what are some things that I can do to mitigate it so that when I say I have an open door policy, and please come talk to me about things, that it actually creates the structure where that is more likely to happen.
That's a really helpful example. And I feel like one that many, if not all of us, can relate to on one side or the other. And it ties into what we talked about a little bit last week too, of the self-awareness to be able to kind of interpret that perspective taking or see where those blind spots might be. So Dr. Craig, how does that educational sharpening facilitate that learning process? Like, how does that help us with our blind spots?
So some of it is learning how to listen. The listening part is key to the perspective taking. And some of that listening requires you to acknowledge some of your own biases that might show up that you may not necessarily know that's there. I think we also, with the educational sharpening, is about providing tips for learning to understand, learning to listen, and not listening to debate, because sometimes we are listening to folks and we're not listening to them because we're trying to think of what we're going to say to the response you just said. And I have a tendency to do that. And part of that's because my background, I was a collegiate debater. And so I can't move away from that. And I know I tend to do that. And so I've got to stop myself sometime to make sure that I'm listening to what the individual is saying to me. And so some of that means that, we've got to learn how not to be defensive, so quick to be defensive, because we always want to give or provide clarity as to the reason why we're saying what we're saying. And the person is like, no, I know exactly what you're saying. What I'm trying to tell you is this. And so we've got to get to that part of it. I think perspective taking, it's an old skill, but it's one that that never really gets old, because it's something that we always got to adjust. Especially because when you're talking to individuals, again, it does matter who it's coming from. It matters how you receive that information. And I think I love what Jen mentioned about some of the things that we just don't think about when we're talking about perspective taking. It's not just the perspective, the discussion that's in the room. You also have to address the things that are not in the conversation. And what could those things be? It could be that if you're an introvert, you're going to approach the conversation in a different way, and you may not be as forward with the questions that you're asking or be so quick to respond than someone who's used to doing that, right? And then you might perceive that as, oh, they don't even care. Well, no, some people need a little bit of time to process what you're telling them. And so they may not have a response right away. But sometimes we make assumptions about what it means when folks don't say something as quickly as we would like them to. So that's another piece. The position and power piece, of course, is another one. The timing of when you have the perspective matters. I might can listen to you for these 5 minutes. And I may not even care in these 5 minutes because I got to deal with this fire. I got to, a knockout over here. So timing matters when hearing that perspective, because that could shape the response that you get back and how short or long, that is. There's other things in the room that Jen mentioned, which is, the body language. Of course, another piece is identity. Identity of the person who identity is at play. If I am someone I might be the only one who is the only Black woman at an organization, and I'm bringing to you some challenging things that I have observed or I feel, I know that I'm bringing that to someone. I don't know if you've dealt with this before, but this is my experience, and I'm bringing this to you, and I don't know if you're going to listen to that. The other thing that plays in the room that we don't talk about is precedent. How have these kinds of things been resolved before? Because that's going to show up in that conversation, whether we want it to or not. And if it's an organization that's conflict avoidant, then I know firsthand they're going to avoid this conversation because that's what you've always done. And so that's going to be a part of the perspective too.
Yeah, I just see so many applications in veterinary medicine, especially when I think about clinical medicine, when we're interacting with our teams and our clients. And if we can really take into consideration different perspectives and be open to that, I truly believe it's going to lead to better care. People are going to be more willing to bring their pets in and talk to us and know that it's going to be in, a judgment-free zone, so that we can make sure we're providing the care that is best fits that situation, not just a cookie cutter, plan. So there's just a lot. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg for those. And we're just teasing these out. So I really think that one is going to have a lot of widespread impact. So the next topic that we have, that'll be our fourth educational sharpening, gets a lot of excitement, because I think this is when people, at least what I hear, when people are interested in DEI topics, but maybe are very hesitant, the thing I hear and that I've thought myself, but what if I say the wrong thing? What if I say the wrong thing? What do I do? I don't know what to say. There's so much that I don't even know. I don't even know what I don't know. So how do I navigate this? So can you tell us, why did we pick the topic of what if I say the wrong thing, Dr. Craig?
Yeah, doing this work, you learn very quickly that a lot of the feedback that I get, I'm sure some of you have gotten even with Train the Trainer and some of those, that you do have folks that reveal the fear of saying the wrong thing, or they're reflecting on a time when they've said the wrong thing. And they're like, I don't know what I could have done. I don't know how I would have handled that. I just froze. And sometimes that happens. We all have those moments where we've said something that we shouldn't have said, or we've had someone say the wrong thing to us and we wish they would have resolved it in a different way. And so what if I say the wrong thing? This is a part of the human experience. It's a part of the human condition. We make mistakes, right? And so we want to get to a better place where we can recover from those mistakes, where we can have genuine apologies, and not just apologize, but our actions demonstrate that we truly do believe that we did the wrong thing and that we are sincere about apologizing for it. And so that creates a positive workplace culture when you can get second chances. I mean, I think we're in this culture now where we just want to cancel people out and be done with them forever. And I think we need to shift more to what I am referring to as a counsel culture, where we need to have the opportunity to have counsel, have conversation about ways words may have hurt us, and how can we move on from that in a productive manner. And so we can't do that unless we expose what are some things that could be out there that could land differently with us and with different people, that we might be out here saying things and not knowing that it's a wrong thing to say. But depending on who you say it to, they might find it disrespectful. And I think that's one thing to take away from this. If you say something to me, you may not feel that it's any harm is done and you may not be bothered by it, but you also don't know my experience and you don't know how many times that statement was said to me and how it led to other experiences. So we can't assume and make assumptions or dismiss when someone is saying that I've been hurt by something, because you don't know the background of it. And so a part of this is exploring, meeting people where they are. And if a person says, I was hurt by that, meeting them in the moment, owning it and saying, wow, I didn't know that I did that. And I'm sorry for that. That was not my intention, but I understand that my impact of it did hurt you. And that's what I want to own and address. And so that's the reason why we're putting this out there, because we also want to share with people how to apologize, what's the right way to apologize without digging a bigger hole for yourself.
Yeah, I think this topic is so important, and I like that it is encapsulated in that question of just what if I say the wrong thing, because it can be kind of debilitating. I feel like you have this desire to be an ally, to say the right thing, to learn the concepts, and then if it doesn't come out right, then are you forever labeled somebody who's not culturally competent, or what's going to make you get over that barrier to try again? And so I love the council culture. I think that's a really great way to kind of think about how to approach this topic. I think what if I say the wrong thing, I feel like can resonate with people kind of individually or personally. But Dr. Brandt, could you tell us an example of kind of how that experience might play out in the workplace specifically?
Yeah, at first I want to say again, we do say the wrong thing. Like I don't know how you're having authentic, meaningful engagement with people and not say the wrong thing on occasion. And so I always want to emphasize that fear that keeps us from saying anything at all is often far more damaging and harmful than saying the wrong thing and having the skill to come back and correct that. That's really clutch. That's really where relationships are built. So one of the things that I commonly see play out in the DEI space is the pronouncement of I don't see race, I don't see gender. And by the way, anybody who, if you've been one of the people like me and everyone else on the planet who said the wrong thing, you often have that instantaneous, like in your gut, you may not even know what it is or be able to articulate it, but something shifted and it isn't good. And so you may make a statement like that and something shifts and you're aware, you don't know why, but it didn't land well. And then often may tend to over explain and like rationalize your decision, not really listening or even taking time to reflect and pause. Like a way to handle that might be, I can see that didn't land well. And the reality is what you might be intending to say is, I don't, it's not good to discriminate, or I'm a good person to come talk to. But first of all, you demonstrate that, right? You don't need to say it in a sentence. That's what will earn the trust. And what's really happening when you say you don't see race or gender, what you're really telling somebody is you don't see them at all. So that isn't helpful. It's saying, I don't see any of your lived experience and what it would be like to walk through the world in your shoes, and how race impacts everything from access to healthcare to, financial access to whether or not you have to worry when you're being addressed by law enforcement. Like, so to say you don't see that isn't helpful. I think in my own life, when somebody says they don't necessarily see gender, I'm a distance walker. And so to do that, you're often up at 3:30 or 4 in the morning. And so if you say you don't see gender in that, then you also don't see that I have to plan, like, where am I going? And have I communicated that safety plan to my friends? And do I have, safety equipment on me? And are there exit strategies? And I'm not going to be able to listen to a podcast while I'm out there while it's dark, because I need to be able to use all my senses at all times. And, I can't use the restrooms there because that may not be safe. Like, so to say you don't see that is not something I find comforting or helpful. And
Yeah.
so I think that's one opportunity where we can have that awareness and then be willing to acknowledge what we've said wasn't helpful. And again, not just give lip service then to doing differently and saying differently, but following through the behavior of that.
That's really powerful. I really appreciate that because I think there's been a lot of conversation around that. And I love that you gave an example of how you can navigate that and how you can think about it. And sometimes thinking about how it happens in your own life can then hopefully make you understand that other people have some different experiences too. So as we kind of wrap up, all of this comes to an educational sharpening where we want to sort of empower people to learn more. So maybe if you could summarize for us, Dr. Craig, what can people expect when they go to this particular educational sharpening number 4?
I think from this one is understanding that I think people will come to this wanting, give me the list of what are all the wrong things I should not say, and I will be good after I see this list. This is not that, okay? This is not that. We will have examples and we will break them up even into some themes or that this might be reflective of sexism. These kinds of statements might be reflective of classism. There's going to be some different isms that will appear on there, along with just kind of the category that it sort of just falls under. And so people can see some of those lines. You'll see a line like what Dr. Brandt said, I don't see color. Well, what does that fall under? How is it perceived to someone if they heard this? And there might be some of those lines on there where folks are like, I say that all the time. I didn't realize that was a bad thing. And so for folks to do some self-awareness, so again, we're practicing those skills that we introduced at the beginning around, what does this mean? Why does this trigger me? Why would it trigger someone else? It's exploring how to move away from that. And then we're giving some tips on if this is said, how do you resolve some of this? And then we've got some exercises that folks can practice and then learn from the reason why it's considered a wrong thing if it landed on to someone in a negative way.
I'm really glad you set that expectation because the reality is that list does not exist,
Exactly.
right? Because it is, we're all people, we're all our own person. And so there's no one all-inclusive list. So definitely appreciate you setting that expectation right from the get-go.
Yeah, so we're really trying to explore those common ones. I mean, even comments like, you're just a man, you don't understand. There are some folks, that might find that to be problematic, especially if they're really trying to understand and learn. And so there are common statements that we make all the time and we don't think anything of it, but it can have negative implications, especially negative implications when we're trying to build relationships.
Yeah, those specific examples are so helpful to highlight how frequently I think this module is going to be relevant in our daily interactions and in reflecting on how we've interacted in the past. I feel like both the perspective taking and what if I say the wrong thing, to use your term from the beginning that I loved, are these powerhouse skills that can really kind of elevate the way that we connect with other people. I loved also, Dr. Craig, that framework that you presented to us of DEI skills as connecting skills, and how can we better relate to the variety of people in our lives and learn from each other and kind of amplify each other. So super looking forward to Educational Sharpenings number 3 and number 4, and really appreciate you both coming on to share with us a little bit of what we can expect in both of those.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you to each of you for joining us on this episode of My Veterinary Life podcast. We absolutely love sharing this journey with you. And so remember, we want to hear from you. So please leave us a ratings, a review, or your experience with Journey for Teams and the Educational Sharpenings on whatever platform you listen to. And you can email us at mvlpodcast@avma.org as well. Take care. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next week.